Welcome to Career Tools, our guidance on email schedule pushback. Here we go. Folks, this guidance answers the questions: how can I keep up with all the email I get? What can I do about my email taking all day? Is there a better time to do email? And what do I do if I schedule email and people start saying, you can't do that. You have to be on email all day throughout the day. So, Wendy, I'm amazed that we have not done this cast, because this is a common question when we're doing any of our conferences: Effective Manager, Effective Communications, Effective Interviewer. When one of us, when Danny, Sarah, Kate, or I make an aside about email, what I used to do, I'd poke people a little bit and say, you're doing email wrong. And people would just be livid, because email is such an easy thing to think of as accomplishing something, when all it is really is activity. Oh, I sent the email, I answered the email. But the answer to the question was simply continuing the conversation that may take another 2 weeks, which is not very effective. And there are a lot of people who schedule email and just quietly think, I've got an enormous advantage over everyone else, and I don't want to give away my secret. But so many people push back so strongly. We've got so many suggestions for what to do and how to do it and what to say to people that I've said these so many times. I just can't believe it's been 11 years and we've never done this podcast. And if you've not listened to our podcast about scheduling time for emails, about email, in fact, there's a podcast called Got Email, and then there's another one about email 3 times a day. If you haven't listened to those, we recommend you do. You don't have to listen to them before you listen to this cast, but we highly recommend you listen to those casts. It goes into more detail, and there's a lot more operational guidance, efficiency guidance that we have about email in those casts as well. So what's our outline?
So first, we're just going to recap the guidance about doing email 3 times a day and exactly what that means. And then we're going to address some of the things that people say when we tell them you're only going to do email 3 times a day. Like, what if I miss an email? There's too much. I have to do it all day.
Yes,
or
my favorite.
Email is how we communicate in our company. That's my favorite. And I have a huge backlog. I'll never catch up. And finally, people won't know I'm here.
Okay, good. So recap. We recommend, folks, that you do email 3 times a day. We recommend you schedule 3 half hours to do email. Our guidance in the show notes says 9 a.m., 1 p.m., and 4 p.m., but we don't need to be that precise. For some of you, I know a lot of people in Silicon Valley go to work a little bit later than many people. They get in at 10 in the morning and tend to stay later in the evening. But in some cases, you're already up in the morning and you could do email before you go to work. If you're in work early and you want to do it, almost first thing, that's great. If you're a manager or if you've got an admin, I probably wouldn't do email before I did stand up with my admin first thing in the morning. But for the most part, the actual time is not as important as within the first hour of your day, but not necessarily the first thing you do when you sit down, middle of the day, and then again at the end of the day. And in each of those half hours, you drive your email inbox to 0. You don't leave mark anything unread, except in exceptionally rare occasions. And whether you have 20 emails or 100 emails, you do all of those emails in that half an hour, okay? What's important about that is many of you are saying, well, gosh, I can't, there's no way I do email all day. It is based on a qualitative difference that happens when you start doing email this way. Most people do email throughout the day. You can defend it by saying, well, we're on email all the time. We'll talk about that in a minute and so on. But that's actually not the issue. Parkinson's law says work expands to fill the time allotted to it. If you allot no time to email, but it has to be done, it will fill up all the free space of your day. I tell people all the time, I suspect that what you do after every meeting, every time you come back to your desk, is the first thing you do is log in and go to mail, and you start processing mail. Because you haven't limited the amount of time you spend on email, you have to do email the entire time because you believe email has to be done, but there's no time limit on it. So therefore, you are constantly working on mail. There's some other things too. People like to get the little bit of jazz of I did something, even if it's reading the mail and not actioning it, or if it's sending back a quick note. And so therefore you feel like, oh, I got that done, because you feel the dread of I have emails to do. The moment you say, I'm going to get all this done in half an hour, you change how you approach email. You don't think of it as, I got to do this, and then I got to do the next one, I got to do the next one. And so therefore, I'll get done whenever I get done. And that's why we end up with hundreds and in some cases thousands of unopened emails in our inboxes. Some people have this from months ago, as if that's relevant. But what ends up happening is you say to yourself, I'm going to get all these emails done in half an hour. Perhaps the first time you do it, you won't get done, but you'll get very close. You feel the impending pressure of a deadline. And I mentioned Parkinson's law, and we've just recently discovered, Wendy, I think you sent it to me, that people are quoting me third hand, don't even know who we are, but there's, I think on the Wikipedia website for Parkinson's law, there's Horstman's corollary to Parkinson's law. And Parkinson meant this in a way that work not only expands to fill the time allotted to do it. So if you have an hour to do something, it will take you about an hour. But work contracts to fill the time you allot to it. If you only give yourself 15 minutes, you can get an awful lot done in that 15 minutes. And so we're going to limit the amount of time we spend on email, and we're going to free up your creativity. We're going to free up your ability to get other things done. We're going to free your mind up to not be looking at the little toast in the corner of your computer. I was just with the chief financial officer of a not small company recently, and I actually had told him twice to turn off Toast, that little announcement in the bottom right corner of his screen. He said, I don't know how. And finally, on the third time, I said, you cannot keep telling me that you're smart enough to be CEO and then tell me you're not smart enough to figure out how to turn off that announcement. And he was showing me something on his computer, and I was looking over his shoulder. And every single time the Toast thing came up, he would look at it. It was Pavlovian. And I said, you've got to turn that off. And he finally did. And he sent me a note shortly thereafter and said, it's unbelievable. I feel like I'm getting all kinds of things done.
I've been known to wait until people walk away from their desk and then turn it off. And 3 days later, they go, did you do something?
Yeah, what happened? So folks, again, we're not going to suggest that that is a complete description and explication of doing email 3 times a day. I will give you my example. My situation has changed. I'm not traveling as much, but at one point I was getting roughly 400 emails a day, and I was doing all of my emails in 90 minutes a day, 3 30-minute bits. I was not on email the rest of the time. And so I essentially knew when I had free time, and I would not do mail. And never a peep from anyone, from clients, from colleagues, from staff, from Mike, my business partner, none. We can find hundreds of people that do the same thing. Okay, so that's the basic guidance. Let's take some of the pushback that people give us, Wendy, and or that they have to deal with in the workplace. The first one is, well, what if I miss an email? Right? What happens is if an email comes in while I'm not doing email.
Yeah, and they don't mean usually just any old email. They mean some urgent or important email that they would miss, and that would be career limiting. First of all, there aren't that many of those emails. And second of all, if there's that kind of urgency around something, somebody will tell you in another way as well. You'll get a text that says, just sent you an email, need you to look at it right now. Or somebody will come to you, or they'll call you and say, just sent an email, which means you have to answer your phone, which I know a lot of people don't do. So the likelihood of it happening is small, and the likelihood of there being other things around you or other means of communication used to alert you is high. And so overall, missing an email that's urgent or important is negligible.
Agreed. But that doesn't change the fact that people say it's big enough that I'm worried about it. Mm-hmm. Suppose I do email at 7:30, and at 10 o'clock in the morning, an urgent email comes out. Okay? I'm not in a meeting, whatever, and there's a belief on my part that there is an assumption on everyone else that every email is being looked at when it comes in. In this case, I haven't done it. Are you saying that I'm not going to get in trouble?
I am. With confidence as well.
Yeah. And how do you have confidence about that?
If we take an example first, an example that's not about email, if there's a fire in the building, a literal one like with flames and firemen and stuff, there's no email. The alarms go off and you get up and you put your coat on and you walk out of the building. And even if you didn't hear the alarm, you'd see people getting up around you or looking at one another to check if it's a drill or not. Everybody always does that. Is this a drill? And if there is a drill, there's people around who know that that is going to happen and they'll be, wearing vests and shepherding you out. And figurative fires don't get email either. If you say you're responsible for the website being up, whatever website you're using in your company, and it goes down, you might get an automatic email that from the server or so, I'm broke, but you'll also start getting multiple calls and text messages, and people around you will start to buzz. There'll be that kind of something in the air as people their awareness goes up and the energy goes up in the room. And like as if you hadn't heard the alarm with a real fire, you'll notice, because that human beings are built to notice what's going on around them, even when you're not concentrating on it. When people start to move or the energy changes in a room.
I would even also say that part of that problem is the idea that something urgent is going to be communicated in email, and that because the people who are monitoring uptime or outages and so on are email-centric people, that tends to be true of folks in software and IT and so on, it still doesn't mean that email is the ideal way to be notified of something like that. And if you've got an outage, if you've got something that you feel like you could miss, then those notifications ought to come to your phone. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't go to email. I mean, basically you're saying that an outage on a server that you're responsible for uptime on, or an impending failure error, or a spike in traffic, or a potential problem with resource constraints, that those things are equivalent in your mind to a notice that your subscription to Architectural Digest is going to expire. It's not smart. And this is not an email problem so much as it is a prioritization problem and a which media might I be using problem. And if you're supposed to respond to something immediately, telling somebody that email is the way to do it is ludicrous. And the example I always use is, what if you were on a plane? I had somebody say the other day, well, I get email on the plane. I'm like, no, you don't. Not always. Not on regional jets. Often the service doesn't work. What if you're in a meeting? And then somebody else said to me, well, I do email while I'm in a meeting. Okay, well, you know what? I can't help you. I could tell the story of the CEO of Google sitting down next to somebody and somebody else saying, hey, you should probably lower your laptop because the CEO, Eric Schmidt, doesn't like laptops during meetings. If we're going to meet, it's expensive. You should be in the meeting and not on mail. And the young guy said, I don't want to. I don't know who the CEO is. And the guy leaned over to him and said, the CEO is sitting right next to you.
That would be a career limiting
move. And then Eric Schmidt reached over and really gently closed the guy's laptop on him. Yeah, so I think the idea of a fire is just poor use of email and throwing everything in email, which is bad. Although there's another reason why that happens. One, of course, it can be done automatically, but very few systems will say, I can send to email, but I can't text a phone or whatever. There are services you can do for that. But it's also just a function of people like using email, right? I can manage my email and now I can have it on my phone. But that doesn't mean it's always a good choice.
Even if for some reason these urgent alerts are going to be continuing coming to you in email, you can't find an alternative, or there's someone who finds it impossible to text or whatever. If you're doing email on a regular schedule, it reduces the number of emails you get overall because you don't get a bunch of chasing emails. And so you're more likely to spot those which are serious when you go back to your email. If you've only got like 4 hours, maybe 100 emails or 50 emails, it's much easier to see which ones are urgent than it is in 1,000.
It's also untrue when you say, well, if there's a fire, my response time has to be immediate. Well, okay, I'll assume that's correct, that there's actually an SLA, a service level agreement, which says you must respond immediately. So what's your percentage failure rate? Because we know you don't respond immediately to everything. We know that there are outages that happen while you're giving a 15-minute presentation, and you don't check your phone in the middle of a 15-minute presentation, or you're not the only person that has to respond. So we're already somewhat less than 100%. One more instance where you're not on mail at that particular moment is bad. Plus, you could easily set up a situation where if you get an email from this address, that you get a text message to your phone. So that's a way, if there's an urgent issue, or if there's an important email, an email from your boss. And by the way, there would be nothing wrong with once in the morning checking to see if you have emails from your boss. This goes back to our earlier guidance, where one of the things we recommend is separating your email into different inboxes so that you don't process your email in chronological order. You process it in level of importance. And the first emails you process are from your boss. Another example that people are always kind of raise their eyebrows and goes, oh gosh, you're right. Any email that you're on that is a distro, that is a distribution list, as an example, or any email that you are CC'd on, goes in a folder through rules on your laptop or your desktop that says, if I get an email that I'm CC'd on, that goes in a folder called CC or distro. And because there's a rule that you can't be given deliverables in an email you're CC'd on, you know there are no deliverables in that email, and therefore it's informational, and you can read that at the end of the day. You don't need to spend 3 or 4 minutes reading an email about HR's new rollout of some benefits consulting process in preparing for some sort of health benefit change, for instance, in the middle of your day. What's worse is taking the minute to read it at a high level and then saying, mark it and go back, I'll read it in again, and adding it to the pile of things that, I feel bad about, but I'm never going to get to. So you only read that stuff at the end of the day. You only process CCs and distros at the end of the day. Now, there may be some of you that is certain distros, there are deliverables in, but generally speaking, they're not. And because they're not going to require action, you can simply read them at the end of the day when you're done with achieving your deliverables. Remember, email is never urgent. If an email is urgent, then that's wrong. It's like sending someone a posted letter and saying, I have urgent news. That's why it's called mail. And somebody who really needs you urgently will text or call. Or maybe your boss will say, haven't you seen my mail? You say, no, sorry. But that already happens now, even though you're doing email throughout the day. Because you're not actually doing email throughout the day. You're doing email at every time you're not doing something else. But there are times when you're not checking email. And on the other hand, as I've already said, if you're checking email every minute or 2 minutes, you are so grossly underperforming and, non-effective and inefficient. It's boggling.
If you're really convinced that you're going to miss an email, then just for the next week or so, flag the emails that you think fall in this category, that were urgent or so important that you would have had to answer them within 10 minutes. And then at the end of the week, see how many there are. And I'm almost certain it'll be much less than you think. And maybe that'll give you the confidence to move to the 3 times a week thing.
Yeah, and if you really feel those are that important, we respect that. You're there, you know your work better than we do. Flag them and then figure out ways for you to be notified of that type of mail. And then pay attention to how many notifications you get. And if you get freed up from 8 in the morning until noon, and you only get 2 flagged emails, That's a completely different life experience, professional experience than what you're having now. So the next one is I can't do email only 3 times a day. I have to do it all day. There's too much.
Yes. And the people that say this are usually working in their email queue. So instead of having the communication part of their job and the work part of their job as separate, they're merging them together. And if you separate them, this worry kind of goes away.
Yeah, I would actually take that second. You're right, separating it is important, but I have to do it all day. There is too much is incorrect. Because again, Horstman's corollary to Parkinson's law, if you tell yourself it has to be done, you can do it much more quickly. And the vast majority of your emails don't require you to take some action outside of the email. And so the idea is that you limit the amount of time and you'll discover there's not too much. I had somebody the other day, I think we just had an internal email. Somebody came to one of our conferences. I think it was Effective Manager Conference. I think Danny was presenting. And the person said, this is all well and good, these one-on-ones, this feedback, this coaching, and so on, but I don't have time for this. And so our presenter said something like, okay, what kind of job do you have? And what's the issue? So I'm getting email all day. He says, well, like, how many emails do you get? 20. And so everyone I know has been infected by the idea that email, oh, I'm always in email. And in fact, everybody says they hate email. In fact, you love email because you're doing it all the time. You don't do things you hate all the time. Otherwise, you go crazy or you quit. So people love email and love the sense that it's a blanket of protection over the level of efficiency you can achieve by doing it differently. So the idea that you have too much email is false, okay? Because if there really was too much, somebody would do something about it. And if there is too much and you're not getting it all done, apparently there are no repercussions of that because you still have your job.
That's true.
And so then the question becomes, how do you choose to feel about it? Well, that level of anxiety you're feeling apparently is unnecessary because there haven't been consequences associated with your feelings of fear and guilt and doubt and regret. So let that go and then lock email into a smaller time frame, and you'll discover that, I mean, most people who are listening don't get 400 emails a day. They don't. And I was doing 400 emails a day and answering some of them. Now, your point is, I think, the second point, which is, what if email tells me I have to do something and it'll take me 20 minutes to do that and I have 100 or more emails and I only have 10 minutes left in my email queue? That's what you're addressing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so what you're saying is we only answer emails, we only process emails trying to get to zero during our 30 minutes. Anything that we have to do, a phone call we have to make, a report we have to create, a review of a spreadsheet, an analysis, a log file review, something like that, we actually get that email saying there's something for us to do. We answer the email and say, okay, I'll get it done and I'll have it to you by 2 or 4 or next Monday. And then we schedule time on our calendar at some time later in the day or the next day or whatever, where we do the actual action involved in the deliverable, rather than thinking, I now have this big email, I have to do this. And now we're processing email rather than seeing email as an unending inbox that every single time there's a piece of paper in our inbox, we have to do whatever's on the paper, which of course nobody does. They mark it as unread and then it sits and it doesn't get done because there's other unread emails. And the only reason that it gets done is because somebody says, hey, where's my stuff? Which, by the way, is not an email problem usually.
Yeah, those follow-ups.
So, okay, I took over, but I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, well, I once went on vacation. I think I was only gone a day. And when I came back, I had 80 emails. And I used to sit with my team around me. And I said, hey, I've got 80 emails. Who wants to take the bet that I can do them in the hour I have before I have to go to a meeting? And everybody went, no, you can't do that. No, it can't be done. And of course, it can be done. And I did. You just storm through them. And I maybe ended up with a list of 5 or 6 things that I needed to do something with, that were a task that I had to do some research or I had to find something out. But the rest of them can be answered in 2 minutes or less, most of them. And if I can get through 80 in an hour, that means that some of them were less than a minute in order to do that.
Something else, I think there's some people who are listening who would say, Wendy, 80 emails in an hour. I suspect that some of your responses are pretty brief, pretty short. Okay, fine. Good, I've got it. Thank you. Something along those lines. I'm worried that that's not relationship building. I'm worried that people will feel that I'm gruff or I'm short, and I need to prepare a response. I need to, take some time. Our answer to that, folks, is no, you don't. Okay. In the vast majority of cases, in the day-to-day interaction that happens in email, that used to happen in hallways, used to happen on phone calls, and so on, those day-to-day interactions, even people who are generally people-focused don't need 3 paragraphs if an okay or I've got it or a thank you is all that's required to communicate efficiently. Email is about efficiency. It's not about effectiveness. And so your tendency to add 200 more words and to craft an email is wasted on 75% of the people in the world. If you send me 3 paragraphs after I've sent, are you okay with us changing the deadline for the quarterly business review? Can we move it from this day to this day? 3 paragraphs is wasteful if, in fact, the gist of your answer is, yes, I can do that. And if you put in the first sentence, yes, I can do that, I'm not going to read the rest of it. Now, you may think I'm bad or wrong, but all I'm doing is pointing out that your rationale for taking more time on your email isn't valid. And then the person says to me, I remember this conversation clearly. I was in Silicon Valley. Well, now I'm not being authentic. I said, sure you are. Aren't there times when part of being you is being efficient? Yes. Well, okay. Are you always inefficient, but at the same time completely respectful of other people? No, there are times. Well, we're recommending you change the way you approach how you communicate around email. And that means you can say, okay, you can say, no, I disagree, let's meet, and send a request for a time. And that's it. And the vast majority of people, it's probably higher even than 75% because of how people use email, are not going to be offended, and you're not going to hurt a relationship.
When you first said that, I won't be able to build a relationship through email or with my email. My first reaction was, you don't build relationships in email.
Of course.
You build the relationship with the conversations you have and the meetings you have and just things other than somebody sending you an email and saying, can we meet at 3?
Right.
If you send anything other than yes, you're not building the relationship. There's nothing else required other than yes. If you write, yes, that suits me fine. I'm happy to be flexible for you. There's nothing in that that's building the relationship. Those extra sentences don't add anything.
Yes. Okay. So next is, well, but I can see where this works most places, but, email is our way of communicating. It's our standard communication medium in our company.
Yeah, all those tech companies who say, yeah, email is the way we communicate. Okay. We'll put aside the fact that that's not a good way to communicate within a company and between people. But it really doesn't make that much difference. Relationships and communication is half of what we say is a successful career or builds a successful career. But the other half is the results. The things you build, the things you create, the things you make happen. And so you have to be able to do those things as well. And if all you're doing is communicating and building relationships and you never get any work done,
the relationships won't matter. You'll be fired.
Exactly. You'll be fired anyway.
Yeah. I will tell you that I think what this is a proxy for I won't be part of what's happening in my company. What's interesting is people then say, yeah, the executives, they're not on mail all the time. Or when my CEO in my 50-person company, for instance, has told everybody the day before, hey, listen, I have an all-day client meeting. I won't be on mail. Nobody questions that. Nobody questions it. I think most people think, oh, he has the power, he can do that. But many people would also say, yeah, he has the power, but he doesn't need to be answering mail if, in fact, he's entertaining a customer all day, trying to get a big order that will help our company grow. And so clearly, you have an example there of someone who has said there are more important things than email. And probably you know what to do if something is urgent that the CEO might normally be involved in, if in fact he or she is not going to be on email. So when you say email is how we communicate in my company, you're essentially saying I'm afraid that I'll be different. But there are all kinds of people who are different. And email is like voicemail. When you send an email, you may expect an immediate response. You expect the person to answer the phone. But when it goes to voicemail, when you don't get an immediate response, surely you don't sit there and say, well, why haven't they answered? Because if you're getting spun up, you're getting frustrated and they say, look, I was in the bathroom and then my boss called me into his office. I'm not going to check email in front of my boss for 15 minutes. So I was in the bathroom. I got a cup of coffee. I was in the bathroom. Then I went to my boss. It was 35 minutes. And by the way, I had a really good meeting with the boss. And you're like, well, you should have answered my email. No, it's like voicemail. And by the same token, people are getting your inbox. They're getting your voicemail. And let's try it. I recommend you try it and see what happens. And you will find there is a gigantic non-event. That's what's going to happen. People are going to not notice. And this sounds horrible. I don't mean it to sound horrible, but you're not that important. And your company doesn't revolve around email. Yes, email may be your primary form of communication, but there are plenty of people who are gone at various times. You'll appear to be gone more in some ways, but most people will just begin to understand that that's how you do email. And you will be one of the few people that has all of your email done, and you won't be one of those people that, I send that guy an email, I never hear back. They're going to get an answer from you within a couple hours. That's immensely preferable to, I'm always doing email, I don't have time. And so therefore everyone says, you never respond.
Yeah. I was writing this and I got a text message. I wasn't looking at my email, but we don't use email as our primary mode of communication around here. It's quite often text messages. And so I got a text message that said, I need some help with whatever. And I sent back, writing, couple of hours. And I don't know how long it was later, because I didn't put that on my priority list. But at some stage later, I got an email, another text message that said, don't worry, I sorted it out. Like, you didn't need me. Like, half of the stuff that people come to you that they ping you about and that they want urgently, you're not the only person who can solve that for them. They're just being lazy and going the shortcut. I know I do it. Like, I'm like, oh, I'll just phone this person and see if they're there. And when they're not there, I go and do it myself.
Yeah. I have an 857 email backlog. I'll never catch up.
Well, we hate to tell you this, but you're not caught up.
Yeah.
like you're not caught up now. There's 857 emails there that you haven't actioned for however long, and right now you're not in trouble. So you can continue to have that kind of backlog and you still won't be in trouble. So there's no need to worry about it.
Yeah, here's the way I recommend you deal with this in terms of inbox zero. There are a number of ways you can do this. One, you can schedule an hour and try to get through as much of that email as you can, with the idea that if it's really old, archive it. And if it comes back, it comes back. Let's be clear, folks. You've never gotten all your work done in any given day. Never. I've never had a person ever, when I said to a group that I was presenting to, raise your hand if you get all your work done every day. No, everyone laughs. So clearly, there's more work to do than you have time to do it, which is actually a good thing. It's an organizational imperative, because it's not great in terms of there's some work that's not getting done, but what it does is cause people to choose to have priorities about what's most important. The opposite is having too little work and having people expanding time on things that aren't important, which is bad, just based on how organizations work. Okay. But you can sit down and try to get through that. I actually don't recommend that. What I recommend is this. You have an 857 email backlog. Okay. We recommend you process your email in certain ways. Obviously, boss comes first, priorities come first, urgent stuff can come first. That's okay. But let's say you're going to start on Thursday morning. Make a note Wednesday when you leave. what the last email is. Now, we're assuming for a moment that you're not going to be on email that night. If you want to modify this because, oh, I'm on email every night, fine, make that adjustment. You don't need to do that, but okay, fine. So let's say I leave and I have 857 emails in my inbox. Okay, that's all. When I get to work the next morning, I have 903. Okay, so I've gotten almost 50 overnight. We want you to schedule the half an hour, and we want you to get through as many as you possibly can, trying to get through all of them. You're not going to get through 857. The first question is, do you get through the something more than, 50 or so that you got in the last 8 hours? And the answer is you will, or you'll get very close. Now, again, as Wendy says, you already had the backlog. So the backlog existing for another 6 hours isn't that big a deal. And trust me, nobody knows you have that backlog. Only your conscience knows you have that backlog, which, by the way, ought to be an indication you could probably just archive it all off or mark it all red or move it all into a folder called archive or call it 857. And then if somebody has a question about it, you still can find your email, not that your email client should be an email repository. All that said, all that aside, we will bet you that you will get through more than the emails you got last night if you push yourself to get it all done. And don't go a minute longer than 30 minutes. And the moment you get past the existing number and you start getting into the backlog of 857, you've just learned a lesson, which is you can get more done in 30 minutes than you thought. And that's the way you'll work through the backlog. You'll get some more mail during the morning and you'll process it and you'll be much more efficient the second time and the third time and the fourth time. After about 10 times, you'll have learned how to do this, which means it's a little bit more than 3 days and you will have mastered how to process email efficiently. And you will have gotten through 100, 150, 200 of those 857. And then gradually over the course of the next month, that backlog will be gone and you will feel so good when it's gone. You will never go back.
And the nice thing about it is that the 850th is probably OBE anyway.
Oh, gosh, 250 to 400 of them are just
the longer it gets left, the less relevant it is. The only thing I thought of while I was writing this is don't do that on a Monday morning. Don't start this on a Monday morning because you'll have to do everything over the weekend and Friday. So start on a weekday morning.
Yeah, good. And last one is people won't know I'm here.
The thing about email is every time you look at your email and there's an email in there, somebody needs you. Somebody wants you. Somebody needs your attention. And that gives all of us a hit in our brain and we think, oh, that's nice. And we try and get more of it. And so it's not so much that people won't know you're there, not that they won't know you're there and not working. It's that they won't be pinging you to have your attention. You won't have those hits every few minutes. And if you look up intermittent reward and email, it's the addiction thing is completely real. So if you think about it like as, oh, I'm only getting email because then I feel good because somebody needs me, that's a really warped way of thinking about email, but it's one that's kind of underneath a lot of the things. But if you really worry about people emailing you and then not getting an answer, you could put an out of office or some kind of explanation there. And the 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss, which was 2007, it was ages ago, was the last kind of big catalyst for internet-wide discussions about this. And in his original book, there was a 4-paragraph explanation of, I only read my email at these times. If you need me urgently, do this. I'm hoping this will make me more efficient, blah, blah, blah. And none of it was helpful, I don't think. You know, if you emailed someone and it was urgent and you didn't get a response in the next 30 minutes, then you'd call them anyway. So you do what he says, if it's urgent, call me. Well, nobody needs to be told that, right?
Yeah.
And now I looked up to today, in 2016, his auto response is 11 paragraphs. It's just got longer. It's ridiculous. There's no need to explain to people. I'm not going to answer your email urgently or immediately. You do that anyway.
Yeah, you do this all the time. You're in meetings, you have things where you're in traffic, you're driving, you're with your family, you're at the dinner table. And if you're answering email at the dinner table, that's a different problem. Because, by the way, if you're answering work email at the dinner table, your kids are not sophisticated enough to know that when they get their own phones, they won't be able to do the same thing. And you'll say, oh, that's work. I can answer emails at the dinner table. Well, that's work. All you're doing is undermining your ability to teach your children that when we're together, you shouldn't be looking at a phone screen. And if they continue to do it, take it away. Take their phone away from them. That'll help solve the problem. Yeah, you really don't need to explain, and people won't miss you, and you'll become more effective. And then, someday they'll work for you.
Yeah, exactly. They might notice you're getting better results. They won't notice that you don't answer an email for 3.5 hours.
They're getting their own stuff done. They're not sitting around worried about you, and if they are, they're going to call you or text you or something like that.
So hopefully we've convinced everybody to at least give it a go.
Good. All right. Thanks, Wendy.
Bye, everyone.
That's it, guys. We hope that you schedule your email and you're better able to answer the pushback that you think you might get, but probably won't. See you next week.
Career Tools produces actionable guidance for professionals every week. To receive additional materials via our newsletter and to find products for situations you may face, go to www.managertools.com. Search for Career Tools on Twitter and LinkedIn.